Just a heads up, I will be out of town for the next few days, so I don't think I'll be uploading anything until Monday. But with that said, I wanted to get a last word about Afghanistan before I go off, because we have more information now. It's been a few days. We're on week 2, or gosh, it's been over. I think it's been over. We might be in the 3rd week now of this Afghan evacuation. And my initial reaction, I think, will have to be updated. As at first I thought, hey, this is going pretty well. Who cares? Yeah, they have to rush out, blah blah blah. But we all knew that this was going to be the end conclusion. We all knew the Taliban was going to take over. Anyone who's followed the situation is not surprised by what's going on. And then the Biden administration came out and said, hey, we've got 11,000 Americans still in the country, and my head just about exploded, because there was no excuse for that. The Biden administration knew far better than I do, or than I did, or than anybody else did, what was going to happen over the course of this year. And so I kind of I jumped on the bandwagon of everybody else who was criticizing the Biden administration, rightfully, I think, and I still stand by a lot of that. But what we were expecting, or at least what I was expecting, what I feared I would see, was essentially the Iranian hostage crisis on steroids. In Iran, after the fall of the Shah in Iran, there were 52 Americans in that country who were taken hostage at the U.S. Embassy. That's nothing compared to 11,000 civilians left in the country, of which we're told about 4,000 of them have actually been evacuated so far. 80,000 people total. Only 4,000 of those or so, the most recent numbers I've seen, are actual Americans. So that would seem to add up to a number of about 7,000 Americans still wandering around Afghanistan somewhere. So why aren't they being picked up? Where is this Iranian hostage crisis on steroids? Why aren't we seeing, pictures of Americans being lynched in the streets by, victorious Taliban fighters? And the answer at this point, the fact that it's been this long and we're not seeing Americans being massacred en masse, is it one, there weren't that many Americans there to begin with, or two, the Taliban aren't killing them and genuinely just want them to leave? Either way, as of right now, it does not appear that this is the disaster that I feared it would be, and that so many people in the media hoped it would be. I always keep an open mind on this stuff. Based on the information that we got early on, it seemed like this was a really, really bad situation. But at this point, it doesn't look that bad. I'm not seeing people being slaughtered. I mean, yes, ordinary people in Afghanistan are. People who were probably collaborators with the U.S. or suspected U.S. collaborators, they're getting, we've seen those bodies in the streets. I've seen those videos. I talked about that early on. It did appear that the Taliban were going door to door, house to house, looking for collaborators, and there were bodies in the streets. But from what I've seen, none of those bodies were Americans. We're not hearing about Americans who are, losing contact with family members and, they're turning up dead. It's just not happening. And the Taliban have had quite a few days. They've had plenty of time. We're not even seeing rogue actors, within the Taliban, because the Taliban's pretty, it's not a disciplined military organization. It's a bunch of, it's a bunch of country boys. To borrow a phrase from, I believe it was the defense minister of the United Kingdom. And so perhaps, the only thing that I'm really waiting on is that August 31st deadline. I think that if we get past that date, and, the day after we don't see Americans massacred in the streets, I would say that this, in the end, worked out pretty darn well. Because everything that I was talking about over the past week or so, about this being, potential, administration ending level event, for Biden, being a massive disaster was all predicated on the idea that there really were thousands of Americans that were at risk of being taken hostage or being slaughtered. And if you look at the numbers, 80,000 is a lot of people from Afghanistan. That's way more people, I'm sure, than were actual U.S. collaborators, than were people who, were, serving as translators for the U.S. military. I don't know who all these people are, but certainly in terms of the number, Biden couldn't go ahead and pretend, at least, that all these people were translators. He's certainly gotten enough Afghan civilians out of there to say, hey, look, I did it. Now, odds are I think these are probably just random people, because we're still hearing reports of, genuine and bona fide Afghan translators and folks who can't get through, the gates of the airport and are waving their green cards in the air saying, hey, let me on the flight. And they're saying, nope, sorry guys, airport's full. We can't take any more folks. And so that tells me that they've taken in a lot of people who were just random folks that showed up who maybe are economic migrants rather than political refugees. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty darn good about this. Do I still think this was handled poorly? Yes. You should have had every single person who you thought who was at risk out of this country long ago. You should have had them all out by May 1st. I've said that over and over and over again. Even if the military was going to stay past May 1st and you were going to miss that deadline, you still should have had all of your civilian folks you want to get out by then, so that you would have time, of course, to sort through who is a legitimate, Afghan collaborator who should be given asylum, in the United States. All of that was very, very quickly brushed over. I think we're going to learn about that in the future. But that aside, this does not appear to be this big disaster that the U.S. media would like to have you believe. It doesn't seem to be that bad, which is, it's hard to imagine that they'd be that tough on Biden, but you also have to remember that the media are the folks who tried to give us Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee in 2020 over Joe Biden. They were not successful in doing that, but, maybe they still have a thing for Kamala, and maybe they're trying to make Joe look bad so that he's forced to resign and she becomes president. I think that is a distinct possibility at this point, because early on, I do think that what the media was saying was reasonable. As much as it pains me to say it, I felt like they were being reasonable in their coverage, that this did appear to be a great disaster. And based on what the administration itself was telling us, it seemed to be a very big deal. And so the only chance left of that, though, is what happens after August 31st. After August 31st, inevitably there will be, based on the numbers they're giving us, if they're saying they've only gotten out 4,000 Americans and there's still 7,000 left, they're not going to get them all out by August 31st. So maybe after that point, we do start to see dead Americans showing up on social media. If that's the case, then that'll be a big deal. That will be a whole new scandal, whole new can of worms. But as of right now, we're not seeing that. And so I think that this is a good note to end my week early on. I think this will be a good thing to leave up. Maybe this will age poorly over the next few days, but I think that I'm hoping, I should say, this is wishful thinking, but I do think it's somewhat rooted in reason. I hope that the words I'm saying today will continue to be relevant for the next few days and going on into next week past August 31st. But I believe by August 31st, I think that's Monday, right? So I should be back in town by then and able to address the situation. So with that said, I will see you folks back here next week.